Hey guys, welcome back. So today we're out the range to talk about a brand new product, well, a remake of a classic product, and it's from Palmetto State Armory. It's called the new H&R Harrington and Richardson line of AR-15s, and they're cloning the original H&R M16A1s, but they're also making 9mm, 604s like you see here, a whole bunch of different types of firearms. At SHOT Show, they just announced they're doing a Colt LMG clone, potentially a DOE 9mm carbine with a little 7-inch barrel clone. So they're really taking this H&R stuff to the next level. We're going to take a look at two of the rifles that they have currently on the market. One of the 604s, I have an M16A1 replica, and we'll compare that to an early SP1 Colt, which would be very close to what the original 604 Colt rifle was that was issued originally to the U.S. Air Force. So let's get started with today's video. This is really exciting for me because you know I love retro firearms, and we'll tell you the backstory on how Palmetto State Armory spun this up. It's really interesting, and we'll do some shooting with these guns, and I'll give you some thoughts. A lot of folks ask me, how can I get involved in the firearms business in that particular community? And one of the best ways to do that is to become a gunsmith. Every gunsmith I know is just overbooked with work. It's a very good living. And so if you would like to become a gunsmith, you need to go to a gunsmithing school or become an apprentice for an existing gunsmith. But Modern Gun School is an accredited college that also works with veterans in the GI Bill, where you can go and get a degree from accredited college in gunsmithing and then go out and start your own gunsmithing business, which I think is a really great option. Again, throughout my entire life, gunsmiths have always been able to earn a really good living, assuming they have a really strong work ethic. So please check out Modern Gun School. I do have a link in the video description below. So first of all, I'm a huge fan of retro rifles. I love the modern stuff. Modern stuff definitely has modern practical applications, but the retros are just more fun for me to shoot and to collect. One of the things that was really interesting during the evolution of the M16, at least in my life, because this gun's older than I am, the thing that I always thought was interesting is they originally started off as super lightweight rifles like you see here, right at 6 pounds. And then in the 90s, the early 2000s, they got into 10 to 15 pound rifles with quad rails and just all the accessories people were piling onto them. And then we started seeing later in the 2000s the concept of retro rifles, but also lightening modern rifles, getting rid of that weight, bringing the gun back to its original designs. Some companies we've even talked about, like Mag Tactical, which is now Fostech, that's doing the magnesium blended guns that like 33% magnesium and aluminum blend, to get that weight down to like under 5 pounds if you get the lightest version of it. So people are trying to move back to that lightweight rifle. Now, for me, a rifle like this is a perfect ranch rifle, a perfect everything rifle. I don't mind iron sights. My eyes are still good enough to use them, but you can put optics on the carrying handles, all that stuff. But I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole. I want to talk about H&R and the rifles that we have out here this afternoon, because these are really, really interesting. Now, right next to this 604, and the 604, basically, guys, Colt would assign model numbers to their firearms. The 604 would be the rifle that the U.S. Air Force would have adopted in the 1960s. So the Air Force was actually the first branch of the U.S. military to adopt the M16, and it would have looked very similar to this or to this. Now, this is an early Colt SP1 here, and this is the H&R clone. Now, I should also point out the 604, I don't believe Harrington or Richardson ever made them. They made M16A1s. They made several 100,000 of them for the war effort. There would have been Colt, Harrington and Richardson, and GM Hydromatic that would make rifles for the war effort during the Vietnam War. So several 100,000 of these would have been made under the H&R brand name. So I don't think they actually did a 604. But if you take a look at some of the features of the original 604, so this would have been like an early AR-15, but with full auto capabilities. This one's a semi-automatic. And here you're going to have the short A1 type buttstock with no trapdoor back here for a cleaning kit. That would come later with the A1. So you have the short polymer stock. Then you have your, the original carrying handle with the adjustable sight here. This is for your windage, and the elevation is handled with the front sight. We have no forward assist. That would come later. Now with the 604s, this would be representative of a later 604, and I'll point out why. So first of all, you'll see that there's serrations on the bolt carrier here, and that's for the M16A1, which would have the forward assist. They would put those in later models of the 604. If you take a look at this early SP1 from the mid-60s, you'll notice it has no serrations in the bolt carrier because there was no talk of a forward assist at this point. So they didn't plan for it by cutting those serrations into the bolt carriers until later. We have the classic triangular handguards. When we take the gun apart, we'll show you what they look like on the inside. They do have heat shielding and just a standard A1 front sight. And we have a bayonet lug out here. This one has an A1 type bird cage. This would be correct for a later production gun. The earlier ones would have a 3-prong flash hider, much like you would see on this early Colt SP1. So it is a fairly accurate clone. I would say it's in the 90-95% range. There's certain things about it that aren't quite correct. So if you take a look at the bolt on the SP1, you'll know it has a gray phosphate finish to it. The bolt on the 604 H&R is dark black. Also, I did swap out the pistol grip. I have a bunch of these old speckled or Bakelite grips that I've kept around. I bought them years ago for like $5, kept them in a drawer. And when I pick up a retro rifle, I'll swap out the plastic grips for the correct speckled grip like this. So this does not come on the gun. But this is an original one on this SP1, so you can see how they're very similar. And so this rifle lacks certain little details. So back here on the early Colts, you'd have a pin through the receiver, lower receiver back here. You'll notice that's absent on this gun, like dimples in the selector lever, absent. A dimple in the selector lever over here, and absent on this rifle as well. So like I said, 95% correct, which is plenty close enough. Now, if you want to get any more clone correct, you can pick up original M16 stocks. Parts kits are out there, original handguards. You can pick up these speckled grips. You can even pick up fire controls and stuff like that that have the dimples in them, or you can modify them yourself if you're trying to get to that perfect clone correct rifle. This, in my mind, is a great rifle. The 604s are right around $1,100 or so, but you can get the blims a little bit cheaper. So it's not horridly expensive. Sure, you can pick up just a regular vanilla M4 type rifle from Palmetto State Armory for $500. This has that gray phosphate finish to it. They're also going to offer them with a black anodization. It's going to be a dark black like the bolt carrier, but you can see the gray next to the original Colt is pretty close. Now this is aged. Obviously, this may have looked more like this gray when it was originally manufactured. This thing is 60 years old plus years old. So yeah, I mean, you can tell that they did a really, really good job. Now, if you take a look at the stocks and stuff, like on the original Colt stock, you can see the seam here. You can see the seam there with some flashing marks. And if you take a look at the butt stocks, you can see the original on the right here, and then the replica on the left. So they did a really, really good job, right down to the sling swivel. If you take a look at how the rear sling swivel is mounted onto the stock with the pin back here, you'll notice that the same is done back here on this retro stock, the recreated stock. So we'll take the guns apart. Internally, they're going to be similar to the 604 and the M16A1 I'm going to show you here in a minute. One other thing that's interesting about the 604 is it says property U.S. government. You can see the H&R logo there. And instead of being rolled, you can tell it's done by a laser, but it also says M16A1 on it. It doesn't say M16, which would be correct for the 604. But they're using these lowers for different builds. So, but it'd be interesting. I'd like to see them do just regular M16 markings on it. So overall, very impressed with it. Nice thing about both of the rifles that I picked up from Palmetto State Armory, they didn't send me these rifles, folks. I actually purchased them. They both shot to point of aim. Had to dial in 1 or 2 clicks of windage and elevation on the M16A1. This one, windage was spot on. I had to come up 4 clicks elevation on the front post to get it 0 to 100 yards. Now, this one has a 1 in 12 twist barrel in it. They will also offer 1 in 7 twist barrels. The 1 in 12, we're shooting it with some Federal 55 grain and 62 grain ammunition out here this afternoon. Here's both the ammunitions. And the 62 grain stuff was shooting really large groups, like at 150 yards, you may or may not hit the target after the rifle was zeroed. With the 55 grain stuff, it shoots nice tight groups. So it doesn't really like the 62 grain. This does have the 1 in 12 twist barrel in it. Now my M16A1 clone that I have out here, also want to thank Federal for supplying the ammunition free of charge to the channel. The M16A1 I have out here, the clone, has a 1 in 7 twist barrel in it. And if you want to shoot a variety of bullets, if you're going to go from 55 grain on up to like 77 grain, you don't want to go backwards to 40 grainers, you probably want to get the 1 in 7 if you plan on shooting a rifle. If you want clone correct, then get the 1 in 12. But you're going to be a little bit more limited in accuracy with ammunition that you choose to shoot out of the gun. All right, so let's take a look at the M16A1 here really quick. Let's take them apart and look at them on the inside. So how did Palmetto State Armory spin up production of these retro rifles? Glad you asked. You may remember a few years back that Brownells did a line of retro rifles, 604s, M16A1s, and I did videos on those, and I have those rifles. And how they did that is they worked with Nodak Spud. If you're in the firearms community and you buy a lot of firearms, you'll know the name Nodak Spud. They're known for AKs and AR receivers and doing retro type stuff. So that's where Brownells, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, acquired the parts to do their retro line, which is now mostly defunct. I think they still sell some parts. What happened was Palmetto State Armory acquired Nodak Spud, and the owner, Mike, joined their force, and then they gave him everything he needed to move forward with doing the H&R line. Now, a couple years ago, Jason and I went out to check out, maybe not quite 2 years ago, a little over a year ago, Jason and I went out to Palmetto State Armory to check out their manufacturing facilities, and we got to see the very beginnings of the H&R line. I mean, it was just a little tiny cubby hole in one of their manufacturing areas, and they just had a couple boxes of some prototype parts, no rifles they could really show off, but they were just getting all the parts made so they could start producing the rifle. So we caught on to these things coming along very early on. And so I was really, really excited. Now, I've been surfing their website, waiting for the models to come into stock that I wanted. I wanted the gray finish. I didn't want the black finish because the gray is correct for clones and other stuff like that. So that's when I found these two rifles. I had to grab them because, again, I'm a huge AR-15 fan and I love the retro stuff. So the M16A1 now I have in front of me. At the beginning of the video, I showed you the 604 with this magazine. Now, this is a Brownells replica waffle mag. All right, so this would be correct for the 604 rifle, at least the early rifles. And I have several of these. I don't believe these are made anymore, and they're stupidly expensive, but you can pick them up if you want to do a clone build. I would recommend just using standard 20-rounders that don't cost an arm and a leg, but if you want one for display purposes, they can still be found. So the M16A1 would have come along. The magazine they sent with the gun was black, which I don't really care for, so I put a gray magazine in it, but the 30-round magazine would be correct for the A1. So what's the difference between the A1 and the 604? Quite a bit, but we'll just kind of touch on the high-level stuff. So the first thing you're going to find on the A1, starting off in the stock, is this one has the clone correct trap door in the rear, so you can put a cleaning kit in there, which I have in there right now, which would have been absent on the 604. Now, they also sell these without this clone correct stock, which is going to be a little bit less expensive. They also sell these with the black finish versus the gray, but the gray is more clone correct. Moving forward, the length of stock was still the same, but you'll notice now that the rear screw back here is holding the sling swivel in, and they've removed the pin from the rear of the stock, which would be correct. And then moving forward, we have the A1 lower, does not have the A2 reinforcements. We have the teardrop forward assist here. And this one has the full fencing on it. All right. And then again, we have the black bolt. And if you take a look at the port cover, it's also kind of black, where the originals were more gray than black. But I can forgive all that. Pretty darn close. A1 carrying handle, adjustable sights, regular key handle. Over here, you can see just the standard fire controls. You can see the H&R markings. Very clean. The finish on this thing is amazing. Moving forward to the triangular handguards, again, nicely done. Out here, just a standard pencil weight barrel, and then an A1 flash hider that would replace the 3-prong. So this is probably my favorite AR-15, mostly because it's lighter than the A2. The sights, I believe, are more practical for defensive purposes or for military applications or whatever. Having a combat adjustable rear sight doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Once you dope and zero the rifle, you don't need to be messing with your windage and stuff like that. Elevation, sure, but with a fighting rifle, not really necessary if you learn how to use the iron sights properly. Now this rifle, like the other one, very quick to zero. Had to make a couple of clicks of windage adjustment, a couple of clicks down on the front sight post to get it zeroed, but you'll notice that neither of the sights on these rifles are wildly off. The rear apertures are nice and centered. So, that's one thing I always worry about with clones is that, especially with AKs I've had some ARs in the past. I think one of my Brownells rifles, I had to get a different upper for it because all the way over on the rear sight, I still couldn't get the gun zeroed. So these, perfectly zeroable, and they seem to be extremely well made. I did replace the pistol grip on this again with the speckled grip. It came with just a black plastic that looks very similar to the buttstock material. So, great finish, everything shoots great, really nicely gassed rifles, and surprisingly accurate. Now, they do make various models of the guns, as I've already talked about. You can even get them with FN hammer forged barrels, but the barrels that they have in this is not an FN barrel, is a perfect clone barrel. Again, this one has the 1-in-7 twist in it, but it has that pencil weight profile, and it's displaying really, really good accuracy. So overall, also I did add a replica sling from the period as well, the green canvas. I need to pick up some more of them from the other rifles, but yeah, overall, great quality, great shooting, well gassed, finish is amazing, Everything about it is just a great rifle. Now, the M16A1s with the trapdoor are going to be a little bit more expensive. They're going to be in the $1,400 price range. If you go with the black finish without the trapdoor buttstock and get a blim model, you can get it closer to $1,100 or something like that. So now the blims I've seen of these rifles, I can't see the blemish. So if you're thinking about getting one and you don't know whether or not you should do the blim, I don't think they're putting out guns with big scratches on them or anything like that. They found something in the QA process that didn't quite meet standards, and so they're selling it as a blim, but fully functional and fully warranted. These are neither of these are blims. I went with the regular versions of them, paid a little bit more. It's about $100 off if you get a blim, I think, if I recall right. So let's do some shooting with the guns. Let's take them apart. And again, guys, this is just so fun for me because I'll tell you a story. I may have told it in a previous video, but one of the things I've always loved about the M16s, especially the A1s and the earlier rifles, when I was a kid, really young pup, I was at an amusement park in Kansas City called Worlds of Fun. It was Armed Forces Day. The National Guard was there, and they had an old Willys Jeep, and on the hood they had an M14 and an M16 with a guardsman standing there. And young me walks up, and I take a look at the M16, and I just remember looking down on it like this, like, oh my gosh, how does this even work? It's so narrow. I'm like, this is just amazing, such a space-aged firearm. And then I asked the guardsman, like, how do you get one of these? Can I buy one? He's like, you can get one if you enlist. And it didn't really help me much. But then at that point, by the time I was in high school, I kept pestering my family to buy me an AR-15, and eventually I got my first rifle, which I've shown here on the channel before. So I go way back with the M16, and the A1 is my favorite because it's a nice blend of lightweight practicality. I prefer the rear sights and stuff like that. So if you're looking for an A1, this is probably your best option right now for a clone. All right, let's take the A1 apart just so I can show you what the internal parts look like. In case you're curious, you probably already know how to field strip an AR-15. So first I'm just gonna make sure the weapon's clear, and it is. And I'm gonna take the bolt and carrier out, pop that rear pin, pull on the T-handle, and there's the bolt and carrier. You can see that it's a full auto cut type carrier, and the serrations, you can see that black finish. And then we have a nice gray finish on the T-handle, which looks really sharp. I'll take this front pin out. The fitment's really nice on the guns. Here you can see the trigger group that's in the gun, buffer assembly. Now 604 doesn't have the Edgewater buffer in it. They all have the same buffer, like this one. Ow, got my thumb caught in there. So you can see it's just a standard modern weighted buffer. On the A1, there's the internals. Nice finish all around. The slip ring, now keep in mind the A1s have right and left handguards on them. The A2s didn't. They were the same. But you pull back on the slip ring, and then you take the handguards off, and you can see it has a shielded handguard. They're replicas, but they're nicely done. You can see the profile of the barrel, the correct profile. So overall, it's really, really nicely done. Guns weigh just shy of 6 pounds, empty. And so overall, again, I think this is just a great rifle. I'm just so glad that I can go out and pick up an A1 like this and have a shooting replica. You know, if it wasn't for companies like Palmetto State Armory doing this, you'd have to try to source the parts on your own, order the Nodak spud upper and lower, build your own rifle, which isn't that hard to do, but it's just nice to be able to sit down, find what's in stock that you want, that has all the correct parts on it, click buy now, and have your own copy without having to go through the whole hassle of having to build it yourself. So, beautiful gun, a lot of fun to shoot, madly in love. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, taking a closer look at the H&R line from Palmetto State Armory. I hope that they continue to produce new firearms. I hope they bring back the AR-10. They probably have the expertise now that they own Nodak Spud. If you have any questions, you can ask those questions down below. I'll try to stick around for the first couple of days to answer any questions you guys may have. If you guys would like to support us here at the Military Arms Channel, the best way to do that is become part of our Patreon family. There is a link in the video description below. Right here on YouTube, you got the join and support buttons underneath the video player you're watching right now. Mash either one of those buttons. You can help support us here on YouTube in the age of demonetization. Last but not least, please swing by, check out Copper Custom. Thank you for 16 years of support. We'll talk to you guys soon.